Obviously, the big news this week was our federal election, and I am joined by Ryerson alumni and two-time federal candidate for the Green Party, Chris Tindal. We're going to discuss the recent election, and in particular, we're going to discuss the Green Party's breakthrough by capturing a seat out in Vancouver with Elizabeth May. Good morning, Chris. Welcome to the show. Oh, try it again, Chris. I had the mic off. One more time. We seem to be having a little bit of problem there, and I'm going to get this figured out. There we go.
Hello. Oh, there we go. Good. Excellent.
I apologize for that, Chris.
That's okay. I made a lot of funny jokes when my mic was off.
And we all missed out, and that's what happens when you get me up at 6 in the morning. Thank you so much for listening. Chris, a breakthrough for your party, the Green Party, but also some not-so-good news. Down almost 1 million votes over the last election. And, in fact, you yourself noted on your blog, and I'm going to read it because I like the post so much, that at less than 4% nationally, the party's popular vote was the worst result since 2000, falling even lower than in 2004 when many candidates had principled objections to ordering things like lawn signs, asking for votes, or combing their hair, etc.
Right. And I should specify that I'm one of the candidates that had the hardest time combing his hair. So that's not meant as a dig at anyone other than myself. But yeah, the party made a decision after the 2008 general election, which I didn't run in. I ran in a by-election in early 2008. That it really needed to elect a member of parliament, and that was the next threshold of success that it would have to achieve. And so in order to do that, they needed to really focus the resources, just as the NDP did when they were looking for a breakthrough in Quebec to elect Thomas Mulcair. They focused resources into that one riding, and some speculate, we know it was hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we don't know how much was spent in order to achieve that breakthrough. So the Greens did the same thing in Saanich Gulf Islands with Elizabeth May, and it did certainly pay off in terms of electing an MP, which was an important achievement for the party, but there were also consequences, and those consequences were a drop in the popular vote overall, and a lot of worse results in different ridings across the country.
So clearly it is a breakthrough, and maybe talk about why it is so important to the Green Party to have a member of Parliament going forward.
I think it really speaks to the party's credibility. You know, there's only so long that the party could have survived on goodwill and on this idea that you're voting your conscience. One of the biggest strikes against the two biggest strikes against the party when you ask people why they don't vote Green or try to convince them to vote Green are, you're a one-issue party, is one, and the second is that it's a wasted vote. So electing an MP and having that voice in the House of Commons is really important to combat both of those perceptions, to prove that a vote for the Green Party can actually result in electing someone, because before the party did that, there were people who were extremely skeptical that would ever be possible, including people within the party itself. Didn't believe that they would ever break through under the first past the post system. And then the second thing is hopefully now that Elizabeth May is in the House of Commons, we will hear a lot about environmental issues and climate change, which she is rightly passionate about. But you'll also hear a lot of other criticism about economic policies and foreign policy and the other issues that are important to the federal government. So it'll help to let people get to know the Greens a bit better, and also ensure that there's more credibility going forward. Without it, I think support would have continued to evaporate. It would have been difficult to see a future, frankly, at least a near future for the Green Party, had they not elected an MP in this election.
Chris, what's next for the Green Party, given that Harper is almost certain to get rid of the per-vote subsidy, which, if I can be permitted to editorialize for a minute, is a terrible thing and a great loss. I think it was one of the very good things that the Chrétien governments did was the per-vote subsidy. But what's next for the Green Party? They've never been a sort of major fundraising machine in the same way that the other parties have been. How do you bridge that gap?
In fact, the what I call the modern Green Party, the Green Party that most people know of since 2004, because the Green Party's existed since the early 80s, but most people only heard of them in 2004 when they ran a candidate in every riding under leader Jim Harris. The very thing that gave birth to that modern Green Party was the per vote subsidy. That's the whole game. That's how the party funds itself. And how it has been able to open a national office and have year-round full-time staff. So you're right. This is a huge challenge because that per-vote subsidy is almost certainly doomed. It'll be a challenge, I think, for both the Green Party and for the Liberal Party because they're both pretty dependent on that funding. All parties have been using that funding and receiving that funding, but you can argue that there are few parties. I don't know if there's any other party that is as dependent on it as the Green Party. So they do have to be very, very they have to get very serious about fundraising, and it's the first time in the party's history since 2004 that they've had to look around and say, "Oh my goodness, we've got to raise our own money now." That can be a really good thing because it forces you to build the base, it forces you to engage your membership, it forces to build your membership. So hopefully those are positive things, but depending on how quickly the subsidy is eliminated. It could be a very painful short term because there's no way the party can. The party doesn't have a history of raising over $1 million a year or $2 million a year, which is what it would need to do in order to maintain its current operating expenses, let alone build up a bit of a war chest for the next election.
So that certainly is going to be a challenge. What other challenges and opportunities do you see on the horizon, given that we are going to move into a bit of a different phase, I think, from minority parliaments where there was a lot of discussion around each vote and each budget back into a more traditional phase now that we do have a majority government again. What is coming? What are the challenges that you face? What is the promise that's there with Elizabeth May having a seat, being able to hold press conferences in the center block and do all those other things that members can do?
It was really heartening to hear the next morning on another morning radio show that's on right now that people shouldn't listen to. Hearing people call in and respond to the results. And they took about 5 callers, and 2 of the callers were over the moon thrilled with the election of a majority Conservative government. And those were the same 2 callers who also said, "And I'm so happy that Elizabeth May is in the House of Commons," which was interesting because that's not necessarily something you would assume those 2 political views going together. But what one of them said was, "You know what? I'm a Conservative. I've always been a Conservative, but the environment's really important to me, and I don't think that this Conservative Party and this Conservative government is strong enough on the environment, so I'm glad Elizabeth May is there to push them." And the other one just generally was happy about the fact that more Canadians will have a voice. I point to some examples on the blog post that you read. One of the things that really frustrated me in late 2007, there was a late-night emergency session of Parliament to restart the nuclear reactor at Chalk River. And that was against the advice of the regulator, who warned that it was missing a key upgrade that was necessary in order to prevent the core from melting down. That's a direct quote from the nuclear safety regulator. And every single member of Parliament voted in favor of that decision to restart without that key upgrade. And I use that as an example because Elizabeth May and the Green Party were opposed to that decision. And there's other issues like that where you can say, you know what, regardless of what you think of this, whether you think Parliament made the right decision or not, this is a controversial issue that at least deserved to be debated more and probably deserved to have a dissenting voice. So that's one of the promises and opportunities, is we will have a greater diversity of voices in the House of Commons. And I think a lot of Canadians, whether or not they agree with the Green Party or Elizabeth May on well, probably nobody does on all issues, they still want those issues to be heard and voiced. The challenges are really going to be in party building, riding to riding. I think one of the biggest losses to the party in this last election were there are a lot of candidates who ran some of their best campaigns ever and got really bad results, or at least worse results. They had their results cut in half, and that's very frustrating and difficult for a candidate. And it also means a lack of funding at the local level, because just as the federal party has been funded by this per-vote subsidy, at the local level, at the riding level, if you break 10% in your riding, you get 60% of your expenses back. And that's become a really good source of stable funding for a lot of established Green Party riding associations, where they know that it's okay. We can spend, even if they can raise it, they can spend the full $80,000 on this election, and still know that we're starting the next election with a minimum of $48,000 in the bank, which is the 60% refund, as long as they break that 10%. And a lot of ridings weren't able to do that, so that represents a loss of stability, financial stability, and I suspect morale at the riding level. So there's, in a way, even though a lot of Greens were concerned about the prospect of a Harper majority, they can now at least be glad that they have 4 years of stability to rebuild. And it's the first time since 2004, since the party came to prominence, this is the very first time that they've actually not been in perpetual election readiness mode. So that is an opportunity and a challenge to take these 4 years and say, okay, well, how can we rebuild as a party? What needs to be done in order to strengthen the grassroots, strengthen our riding associations?
I've heard exactly the same thing from my Liberal friends. They say if there's one silver lining for them, it's that they do have 4 years. If you're out there and listening, we thank you for being along. And if you want to give a call and ask Chris a question yourself, it's 416-595-1655. 416-595-1655. Give us a call. Chris, you're not just a former Green Party candidate. You also ran for a city council in a race that I was somewhat involved in myself. Turning to the city level, we now have, if you count Pickering, Scarborough East, 9 Conservative MPs from the city of Toronto. We have 8 New Democrats and only 6 Liberals left. What does that mean for our municipal politics? What does it mean for our relationship with the federal government? It certainly is an entirely new look when you look at the map of Toronto from what we're used to seeing.
Yeah, some people were joking on election night, on Monday night, watching the results come in. A few Torontonians on Twitter said, "Oh man, we're going to get so many subways." This allusion to the idea that our mayor is a proud conservative and a partisan conservative, has endorsed Stephen Harper's party. In theory that should be good, and in fact the mayor has said it will be good. He said that he'll have a good relationship with this federal government, and indeed that was the sentiment that I heard expressed by some Toronto Conservative supporters as well, where they were saying, you know what, it was pretty much a direct appeal to pork. I mean, it was an unfortunate conclusion to draw, but they were saying the Conservative government won't forget who elected them, and Toronto played a role in this breakthrough, and they will reward and acknowledge where their support is. So obviously there are Conservatives who are optimistic about what this means for Toronto. It's really hard to say, right, in terms of what impact this will have on the city, because we don't know. I mean, I don't think that this federal government has been particularly strong on municipal issues so far, but you would be hard-pressed to actually point to any federal government that has been particularly strong on urban issues. So perhaps there is hope that over the next 4 years they will make some investments. I don't know if that'll happen or not, but it'll be on. I mean, it's nice that the mayor has said that he believes they will, because then it's sort of on him a bit too, right? He chose to publicly endorse this party, and as a mayor, you would hope that he was doing so. You would assume that the mayor would endorse the party that he felt was best for the city. So, and there were some people who questioned that endorsement and said, "Really, is that the best party for Toronto?" So now we'll see.
And the fact that the endorsement took place outside the city of Toronto when they did it, I think
that's right.
I think even the Conservative Party is probably somewhat surprised at the 9 seats within the 416 area code, given that I don't remember Stephen Harper making it into the city, other than. Actually, I don't remember him making it into the city during the campaign. He did spend a lot of time in those GTA ridings around us, and right. Did invite Rob Ford out to Ajax to endorse him, but didn't manage to make it into the city. So I think we're not the only ones surprised to see that much blue coming down into the city, and it will be interesting to watch going forward what that does mean for our city. I mean, I guess the other thing that does stick with me, though, and we say this all the time in a first-past-the-post system, it has its strengths, it creates majorities, but its weakness is it's certainly the parliament you get doesn't necessarily represent the votes that were cast, at least on a national level. My party, the NDP, actually, ironically, probably is approximately properly represented this time, about a third of the vote and roughly a third of the seats. But you see the Conservatives overrepresented and the Liberal Party underrepresented, and the other parties actually significantly underrepresented. If you think, well, 4% was not a good result for the Green Party given recent history, one seat is still less than 4% of the seats in the House. Are we going to see any movement on voting reform? I know they're moving forward in the UK. The home of the Westminster system has a referendum today, in fact, looking at some alternatives. Are we going to see any discussion of this at the federal or provincial levels?
I think that, well, first of all, the UK referendum today, unfortunately, is expected to fail. I've started to suspect that voting reform and electoral reform may have become the opium of the left. It's really easy to use it as an excuse, and it's a great way to get a rallying cry. If you're at an NDP rally or a Green Party rally and you're giving a speech, all you have to say is, "We need proportional representation," and everybody will cheer because it's a system under which they know that they would succeed. And that's when we lose these debates. That's when we lose these battles, and that's what's happening in the UK. Is voting systems get argued not based on their own merits, but based on which political parties they would help. So the push for proportional representation becomes perceived as a campaign by the left to gain more power, rather than what it actually is, which is a proposal to reform the voting system so that it would be more fair to all voters and to all parties. I think I'm not optimistic that we're going to see voting reform at the federal level anytime soon, because we've fought this battle and we lost. I mean, I was someone who was very active in the referendum in 2007 in Ontario to bring in the MMP voting system. I wasn't able to send my own corporal self, but I sent money to British Columbia for their most recent referendum on STV, another voting system. But those have been rejected by the electorate, and now it looks like AV, the alternative vote, may be rejected in this UK referendum. It's not a reason to give up, and I'm still a proponent of voting reform, but I think it's going to be a bit of a longer battle where we need to educate people. I was having a conversation just yesterday with a very smart and informed colleague of mine who really didn't get. They said, let me understand this. Are you suggesting to me that the seats that each party was elected and received yesterday don't correspond to how many votes they actually got countrywide? And they weren't aware of that, and I explained it to them. And they said, "Well, this just doesn't sound fair." But we still have so much work to do as far as that education goes. One interesting organization right now is this group called Rabbit, Toronto Rabbit. It's called Rabbit. This is the Ranked Ballot Initiative of Toronto. And they propose just going to a ranked ballot, an instant runoff, which it's not a system of proportional representation necessarily, but it is a kind of voting reform where simply you would be able to rank your choices on the ballot. Instead of marking 1X, you can say my first choice, my second choice, my third choice. So your first choice would obviously be Joel Dick. Your second choice would be Chris Tindal. And, those election results, they probably would have been the same. But it gives voters that opportunity to say, you know what, I really want this person, but if they don't get in, then I would settle for this person, and you get an instant runoff. And that could be an interesting thing to explore locally, because that kind of voting system could work. And this is, we could debate this for hours. There are people who say no, that's actually a bad voting system, but that could be a really interesting reform locally, and people could start to get used to the idea that, oh, you know what, there's more than one way to vote. And once they get used to the idea that voting is not always marking an X for one candidate and seeing only one person elected, then they're more comfortable with the idea that there are different voting systems, and then maybe before you and I are gone, we can have another provincial or national discussion about a system of proportional representation at those levels.
Absolutely, it is an interesting initiative going on here in Toronto. I am on the record sometimes defending our system. I think people do overlook some of its strengths, actually, and I think we have to be honest about those as well. And every system has its weaknesses, but I do find myself agreeing with Chris on your key point. I certainly find in my party, in the NDP, it can be used as a distraction, as an excuse for not playing the system the way it exists. I think we have to do both. If we're going to be in politics and going to be political parties, then you have to deal with the system you find, but also, of course, you look forward to making it better. Chris, to change topics from the overtly electoral, I saw you were in the Toronto Star quoted yesterday that Bixi hadn't delivered your key yet, and I was wondering, do you have that key today?
Joel, I rode a Bixi bike here this morning. I did receive my key in the mail, and Bixi must have, if they're doing their tracking, they must have thought I was really, really eager because I got it yesterday, and then my very first bike ride started at 5:30 this morning. Thanks for that, by the way. Thanks, buddy. So yeah, I'm really excited about Bixi. I think it's a huge opportunity for the city. Very frustrating that there are these early hiccups that. The keys members, a lot of us joined. The thing is that a lot of us joined over half a year ago because they needed members in order to exist. So we, on this leap of faith, shelled out the annual fee a long time ago, and we're expecting to receive our keys in time for the launch. So that was a bit frustrating. And then this morning I had a bit of a hiccup when I couldn't find a station that was supposed to be on a map. So I got here, you can hear me kind of still breathing heavily because I had to ride to another station to drop off the bike before jogging back over here to the studio. But I think it's an exciting thing for Toronto. I think it'll be good.
Absolutely. And I know it's hugely successful in Montreal. Do you think the zone is big enough in Toronto to support it? The one concern I've heard expressed by people is that the zone is simply not big enough. In Montreal, you can travel to the majority of the city. Here, our Bixi program in Toronto really does cover the downtown.
Yeah, and I think that's its biggest weakness. I think it really needs to expand quickly. Otherwise, people will find it less useful, and I think it'll attract fewer users. And I think that was really short-sighted of the last city council because Montreal, I might have these numbers a bit wrong, but my understanding is that Montreal started with 2,000 bikes and then ramped up really quickly from there because the only thing they discovered was, oh my gosh, there aren't enough bikes, there's too much demand. Here in Toronto, we started with half that. We're starting with only 1,000 bikes. We're starting with the stations only the downtown core, so you can... the furthest northeast station is around Jarvis and Bloor. The furthest southwest station is near the lake and Spadina, I think, is as far west as it goes. So you can't bike out to Liberty Village. You can't bike out to the Danforth. There's a lot of, or north of Bloor, which I've heard exists. So there's a lot of places in the city that you can't get to, and I really hope that Bixi expands those stations quickly. Because otherwise it's a significantly less useful service if there's a limited number of destinations that you can arrive at to drop off your bike.
Yeah. And finally, Chris isn't just a candidate in elections. Despite my introduction, Chris is also a singer, a songwriter, and a musician. Chris, what is the 52 Song Project?
Well, Joel, my 52 Song Project, one of the things after you and I went through that grueling year-long election campaign.
It's shocking how short federal elections are,
isn't that funny?
Isn't it?
That just happened. It just went by. But seriously, after a year of campaigning, one of the things I missed was spending any time on music. So I said to a friend of mine, who I jokingly refer to as my musical life partner, hey, I've got this crazy idea. What if we wrote and recorded and released a new original song every week for a year? And he said, I think that's a great idea because he's as insane as I am. And so we created 52songproject.com, facebook.com/52songproject, on Twitter at 52songproject. And that's what it is. We write and record and release a new song every single Friday morning at 9 a.m. And we're on to, I think, song 17 now. So it's a great way to, you're really aware of how time is passing, but it's a really exciting creative exercise for us to have that discipline around writing and recording music.
And I've got song 17, Think a Drinka, right here. Chris, tell us about this song as I get her started.
A friend of ours wanted to. He's a reporter for itbusiness.ca, and he wanted to discover if you could write and record a song entirely on an iPad. And so he wanted to do a news story about that. So he brought us down to the Steam Whistle Brewery in Toronto. and we had exactly 3 hours to write and record the song. So we had to write this whole song from scratch in 3 hours and then record it. We were in a brewery, and so we ended up writing a song about beer.
And here is that song.
Mercury rises, we'll tip our green bottles and say, our cold green crisp fresh, just like every TV commercial, doing what we do real well. Every girl looking just like a bone by the mondo. I can't stop smiling till the closing bell. I came to breathe some life into this party. I came to walk to the beat of my drum. All cold cream crisp fresh, just like every TV commercial. Doing what we do real well. Every girl looking just like a bona fide model. Can't stop smiling till the closing bell. All cold cream crisp fresh, just like every TV commercial. Doing what we do real well. Every girl looking just like my door. I can't stop smiling till the closing bell. All cold cream crisp fresh, just like an MTV commercial. Doing what we do well. Every girl looking good, just like a bone, just like my door. I can't stop smiling till the closing bell.
That was Chris Tindal and the 52 Song Project.